Okay, great. It is exactly 12, or I'm sorry, 10:30. We're going to call this meeting to order, Finance Committee. First order of business is roll call. We've got that knocked out already. Approval of agenda. Um, Jeannie, can you make a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Thank you. Anybody for public participation online? Not seeing any hands going up. And nobody in the room. Okay. Approval of the minutes, the February 17th joint minutes. Jeannie, can I get a motion for that?
Yeah. Motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Angela, it's all yours.
Thank you to the chair. So January, we had a strong operational month. We had a positive volume across several key service lines. And at the same time, we continue to make progress strengthening our financial processes and improving our alignment across systems, particularly in accounts receivable, cash management, shared workflows. Our inpatient and outpatient volumes were strong in January with gross patient revenue of $25.8 million, exceeding budget by over 16%. We saw significant growth in MRI, largely driven by orthopedics and general surgery, along with higher med-surg census due to increased demand and some longer patient stays. So overall, solid operational momentum in January. Our contractuals came in below budget. This is related to how budget was paced across the year from a contractual standpoint. And we're continuing to move towards that consistency of applying the 45.6% contractual discount and allowances rate that we've discussed. So there was upside there. We still continue to have some of the same revenue headwinds, the Rural Health Demonstration Fund not being renewed, which is $4.2 million annually, which would put us just around $2.6 million for year to date. Wildfire Court interim rate reimbursement that was a $1.2 million annualized impact from the one-time occurrence. Good news on the Bartlett Family Medicine perspective. Our net loss for startup has dropped to $68,000 year to date through January 26. So in January, it actually had a monthly operating profit of $161,000. That did include cash billing. So really great work on turning the clinic to a more profit-bearing status. Glacier Peak startup losses year to date, January 20, were $254,000. So all these revenue reductions are external program changes and strategic investment decisions. So there is continued momentum in our operating core and in our service performance. January bottom line, the January 26th operating profit was $875,000. And that brings our loss year to date down to $352,000. Looking at February 26th, charges were up 17.6% to the same month prior year, down from January, but it also had less days. So we anticipate February to be fairly positive. And we are finishing that work now. Accounts receivable. Any questions on the income statement before I go to accounts receivable cash?
Jeannie, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Can we just hover on a couple of things on the P&L? Angela, could you talk a little bit to the significant increase in the outpatient MRI, the 21% increase there?
That was volume driven, and it was primarily around orthopedics and general surgery driving some of those volumes.
Yeah, that's really great to see. And could you also, in the middle paragraph of your report on page 6, the contractual, comparing the contractual for January 54 versus the prior of 45. And just, if you could just kind of expand on that a little bit, what's behind that, the cause of that.
Right, so we are flatlining our contractual discounts and allowances at the 45.6, which we have vetted through our outside partners, DZA, as well as our auditors, Hyde Bailey, that is our discount rate, which means the inverse of that is our collection rate. 1 minus 45.6 gives us our collection rate of 53.4%. And what we've decided to do is flatten that across all the months, so it's consistent and we don't have a lot of changes. The budget wasn't built that way, so in December, contractual discounts and allowances was 32% on budget, and in January on budget, it was 54%. So we saw a negative to budget, unfavorable from actual to budget, because we've set it at 45 to flatline it. But in December, the budget was 32%, so it looked like we had a much higher contractual than what was budgeted. We did, because we flattened it out. In January, we saw that flip over as we discussed.
Right. Yeah, I understand that.
Great, thank you. And just one other focus before we go on to the balance sheet, if you could talk a little bit to the allocation of overhead to Wildflower Court at the bottom of page 9, and then on 14 and 15, same thing for hospice and home care. Just a little bit about the process that you used for doing that and so forth.
Sure. So we have talked about over the past couple months getting to a place once we finished audit and restated financials of layering in overhead allocations. So this is all corporate departments that are shared service. And the way that was calculated was I created a schedule and took all year-to-date January 26 balances for all of those corporate departments or organizational shared service departments. Totaled those up with about 34 million. And then I took the gross revenue for each. That I printed it. I did. Gross revenue for each of those service lines, Wildflower Court, home health and hospice, and took those as a percentage of total gross revenue for the consolidated, and then applied that percentage to the amount. So that's how those shared services costs are allocated.
Great. Yeah, so that's roughly at the bottom of page 9, then that year-to-date allocation of $2.2 million represents about 6.3% of the total that you allocated out, which is consistent with the top line for Wildflower Court as a percentage of the total revenues for the mothership. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, great. Okie dokie. Okay, go on. Thank you.
Okay. So accounts receivable. Accounts receivable increased during the month, and that was the contributing factor to a $1.2 million decrease in cash. The increase to accounts receivable was 3.4. So there was still some additional cash collected, but a lot of it was due to timing. We were coming out of the December, January holidays. People don't want to cut checks to organizations or pay healthcare bills during the holidays. And we were ramping up during the month. So it was an increase in charges in January over prior months. And there's always a delay in collecting between 30 and 90 days. So that contributed to a decrease in cash. The cash continues to be low because of the same things that impacted it in December. That's when the big change happened. 7 million was moved into restricted accounts for capital expenditures, and 5.6 million was due from the bond payments, the cost report settlement, the pulling in the payroll by 1 week, and the reduction in accounts payable that happened in December. So that was the 12 million initial decrease in December that now we're still seeing in January.
Okay.
And
Hi, Deb.
Good morning.
I started without you, Deb.
I knew you would. Justifiably so.
Okay, all right, so Angela, on page 11, the days in AR, the increase there, which is all tied to kind of what you're talking to us about, would you just, I mean, that's a pretty significant increase. Where are we on collection of AR from, what's driving that?
There are a host of factors that are driving that increase in days in AR. So that is the length of time it takes us to collect on a charge. And it has gone from roughly in the 60s to now we are up in the almost 90s. And we are doing several things to identify all the root causes of that and fix it. That includes building a RCM dashboard, which includes denials, so we can identify why things are being denied and where the process is breaking. We are looking at a process mapping of the patient journey, which is from the first touch point to the last. So how are we interacting with the patient every place along the way, and where is that process breaking down from a collection perspective? Is it at registration where we're not collecting copays and deductibles? Is it that and a combination of other factors? Given the amount of increase, I would imagine it is a slew of things that are occurring that we need to run down and address those core system issues. So we are creating multiple pathways to identify those and rectify them.
Are you seeing
So,
change?
go ahead, Jeannie.
I was just gonna ask, are you seeing changes in insurance status due to some of the federal changes? So are less people, do people have less insurance or higher deductibles that could be, meaning things are just not being paid?
We haven't seen that impact yet.
Okay.
It is something we're
Uh-huh.
watching closely. We have seen a little bit of the payer mix change. Do you think for the pay? And we are running that down.
Sorry.
So
guys.
yeah, sure. So when you look at that increase of the days in AR from that, kind of the mid 60 range that we were up until about August to the 87, and Angela and I discussed this some yesterday, and that dollar amount's about $12 million. So I mean, it's a significant increase because that's cash that we don't have that we're investing and so forth. And um, you started with the denial process, and I'm just kind of curious, and I know you don't necessarily know the receivable by function, but is any of this tied to the new services that we're providing? I'm just trying to get a little bit, or is it just that we're not working denials? That it just seems like an awfully big increase for it to all be denials to me.
I don't think it is solely denials. I think it's a host of issues that need to be reviewed and process analyzed. Denials is just one quick way to identify where we have a process break. For example, if we have a issue with prior authorizations, maybe the insurance changed the prior authorizations and it didn't flow through our system timely. That would be something that would have a downline effect. If we have new providers that are missing modifiers or codes in the billing, that can have an effect. I've seen that in past life experience, missing lateralities, missing modalities, that kind of thing. So there's a lot that's going to go into that to identify all of the root cause issues. And I will be bringing that information back along with what we've done to remedy it. But it's just one method to drill into that process.
Thank you. Angela, anything further?
Not on financials, thank you.
If we could go to page 17, the chart on page 17, that med surge increase between December and January. I mean, that's completely anti-cyclical of what you would typically think should be happening. And would you just talk to that huge increase in med surge?
Yes, that is something that we would normally see closer to a midsummer month. And
Yeah.
there has been increased census in med surge. In fact, we've had quite a bit of earlier increased census than we would normally. Kim is shaking her head. Would you like to comment, Kim?
Through the chair, yeah, we haven't seen a big rush in flu like the other facilities in the state are seeing, but we have had an increased census, and it's just a mixture of, complex medical problems mixed with complex placement problems. But yeah, we agree. We definitely felt the increase in census for sure.
I bet you did. So it's more of a kind of I don't want to call it a one-off, Kim, but it's not a trend that we're seeing there, related to, orthopedic and the other services, or is that part of it too?
Through the chair, yeah, I think that's part of it too. Last winter, we didn't really see a big decrease either. It wasn't as dramatic as this increase. But it seems like more and more those winter months, there are less few days of where we have a really low census and more days where we have a frequently higher census. So I think orthopedics does add into that, although some of those patients go home same day. But some of those patients also end up going to the floor to recover. And so that could be added part of that census too.
Got it. Thank you. And then page 19 on wildflower court days, I think we all understand, that was related to the water event. I just wanted to point out the fact that we were monitoring that for minute purposes, that, we were actually expecting that decrease. So is there anything more to add on that, Angela?
Kim, do we know when that's reopening?
Right, so currently, through the chair, we currently have an outbreak of RSV. And so we have put all admissions on hold for 2 weeks. We just started that this past week. And then within that timeframe, if we don't get any more increase of cases, then we'll reopen to admissions. And I believe, Deb, the total census is at 45 currently?
Today we're at 50.
50.
Oh, great. Okay. Okay. Is there anything more on your report, Angela, or Jeannie, or Deb? Do you guys have any questions on the financial information?
No.
Okay. Moving on to the audit report. Angela?
Audit report, thank you. We did have some findings which we had anticipated and discussed as we went through the audit process, particularly around financial controls, cash controls, and cadence of reconciliation. So the action report has been included for review. Many of these have already occurred, and we will continue working on these actions to remediate any findings. And that includes making adjustments to how we are reconciling with the city and the cadence and timing of those communications as we move forward.
If you could go, Suzette, to page 21 on the action plan. I want to focus on the areas identified and the corrective actions completed. And we brought up this idea of kind of taking a look at the relationship between Bartlett and the city. And in this case, the relationship as it relates to, ongoing financial transactions and, just the economic interaction, if you will. And when on the third, and I'm focusing on the corrective actions around the cash reconciliations, the bank account, the interfund, which includes, all the investment related activities. And when I read that, you might take that as being, hey, we've kind of resolved these issues. These issues are still outstanding. Is that fair to say, Angela?
We cleaned them up through audit, and we are currently working on remediating them. We've identified processes, but it is a continual process. It is not fully put to bed.
Um, the areas that are, probably maybe high touch or potentially less efficient than they could be. Can we talk through, as far as the transactions back and forth between the city and the hospital, what are those areas that we could do better with in terms of the transaction types?
Absolutely. The key touch points that that drove the findings were cash reconciliation, interfund reconciliation, and capitalization of assets in progress. So those are functionally different between the way the city is required to account for them versus the way we are required to account for them and meet our regulatory compliance. And for example, the city does not have a hard cutoff at the end of the month. We absolutely do. We cannot go back and post into prior periods. They can. So we have addressed that by doing year-to-date reconciliations on cash and interfund to capture any prior period entries they may have made, so that we don't miss anything and we are in alignment. Unfortunately, anything they did in a prior period and posted in a prior period, we would be posting in a current period. So there will always still be a timing difference. And where this is going to cause an issue is when we go to close our June, it'll be part of our restatement post-audit because they will still continue to make entries after we will have closed our books and gone through audit. So that's one issue, and that's cash and interfund. The second one is assets in progress. So they're not required to close the asset at the point that we place it in service, where we are required to do so. So we have communicated to them that we will be closing the asset and placing it in service, regardless of how they have it on their books, whether it's still open or not. And that is because they will hold it open until they are sure there are no more invoices coming. That could be 1 to 3 years down the line. We will be closing it at the point we place it in service. So there will also be a timing difference there. We're working through the reconciliation portion of that. If we're going to have reconciliation schedules to support those timing differences, just like you would if you were doing like a tax reconciliation, right? And in 1 or in 3, we'll have those working, but we're still identifying that process and building it.
Is there do you feel a sense of collaboration with the city on resolving these issues? I mean, do they understand your needs and are supportive to help you get where we need to be? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think they have been collaborative to the point of we're now having monthly meetings.
Okay.
We've identified that these issues have to be addressed on our side, and we will work to facilitate that reconciliation and communication. They are going to continue to record things based on their requirements as they understand them. So that will not change.
With some timing differences.
Yes,
Their way of doing the way they have to do things is different from the hospital.
correct.
By using, so it's just awkward.
So,
Yeah, it's a juggle.
Right.
through the chair, what is the, if we know, I know you haven't, you're, you don't have the history of the CIP closing, but how frequent or what's the magnitude of the amount, either dollar or number of invoices that come in after we would have placed it in service?
So I've been involved in those meetings for 9 months now. And I have seen one invoice come through that was on a prior project, and it was about $1,200.
So not material to the,
It was immaterial. Yes. So if we
And
found
that's the
somebody,
whole project and
yes, and that was one that went back a couple years. So it's something that we could have appended to the asset if we felt it was worth it. Otherwise, we probably would have washed it through as an expense.
that's okay.
Angela, can we kind of take a step back and look at a little bit of maybe the bigger picture? When I think about the activity between the city and the hospital, the big areas are the cash and obviously in investments, fixed assets and capital projects. Project management is another big area. For those two, I'm curious about, and let's start with cash. When you have cash, you've got both your investment related cash, the stuff that is just your excess cash that is, being invested, and then you've got your day-to-day, operational cash, if you will, the money that you need to make payroll, right? And so I'm curious, and right now, as I understand it, which is the way it's been forever and ever, that all of that, both the investment and the regular day-to-day cash flow through CBJ. And is it fair to say, or I guess I'd like your thought about whether there's any value or sense in looking at taking at least the operating cash and setting that up in a separate kind of bank account, treasury management account, if you will, and have enough cash in there for the hospital operate so that we have less of this kind of back and forth between the city. I want you to talk about that. And then the second one is CIP, and I want you to not necessarily when we place an asset into service, but these projects, especially that we've got coming up with our facility plan. One of the big differences, for example, between the airport and the hospital is the airport has their own project engineer on staff who does their projects for them. And we, on the other hand, use the CBJ engineering department. And I just wonder if it would be more efficient, or I'd like to, it doesn't necessarily have to get answered either of these today, but, would there be value in us having control or the ability to do our own project management on our capital projects?
Sure, I will speak to that, Chair. As far as starting with cash, from an operating cash perspective, the way our operating cash account works is it is a ZBA account or zero balance account. So every night, any cash left over that isn't already committed for is sweeping into the CBJ account. It is owned, administered, and controlled by CBJ. So we are users on that account. Part of the concern that was actually raised by CBJ, and this is when we pulled in our payroll in December to accommodate the UKG transfer and also improve quality of life for onboarding employees, so they only had a 1 week lag on their payroll, was that we moved our payroll to the same timing as the city and the school district. So they were concerned about that amount of funds flowing out of their account in 1 week, and they would have to address the cap on that account. So if we did have a, working operating account that wasn't zero balance account, that could potentially solve some of their issues. I have not followed up with Angie Flick to see if they raised the cap on the account or addressed it other ways. Seems to be working okay for now. But that's something we can look at. We would have to take some steps to do so. But one of the agenda items to do this year is to create a 13-week rolling cash flow. So we know what our operational needs are on a rolling 13-week period. That would help us identify what that monthly operating cash bucket would look like. And then we could pursue further discussions. The investment piece is we don't see those accounts. We don't have access to them. That is completely managed and viewed by CBJ. And then if we request it for audit, they will give us sheets to show allocations of interest on the investment piece. That was also one of those last sticking points at the 11th hour, was a misunderstanding of CBJ thought our auditors were trying to audit all the cash, but what they were trying to do was validate that, hey, you said that you have 45 million of Bartlett money, show me where there's $45 million. And that took a while to negotiate and get cleared for audit. So I think maybe there's some process improvements or enhancements we can do. Maybe it's a communication item. As far as the engineer, having a potential, I think the engineering department works very hard and does a great job over there. But they are not healthcare experts. And if we potentially had a healthcare specific engineering or program project management consulting firm, I would not propose we bring that in-house because our projects can be quite sporadic. But if there was a healthcare specific consulting firm, that may be a pathway forward as well. But something that takes significantly more discussion. This is more off the cuff and discussing possibilities.
Thank you. Thank you for that. That was an excellent response, Angela. And I guess I would like to add this as kind of a something for us to loop back on, not necessarily next meeting, but I would like for both of these areas related to cash. And also there's kind of a sub comment there around how cash is set aside for appropriations that should be evaluated. And then also this engineering and, Deb, I don't know if, this is something we'll probably want to give a little bit of an update to the board on too, but it seems to me we should have Angela, working with Joe, look at what those options are, engage with CBJ about what those options are, both related to this Impress cash, but also project management, and then report back to us in the future. Does that seem to make sense to you, Deb?
It does. And Joe and I, there are a number of outstanding issues. The relationship with cash management and engineering are on the list too, but Joe and I plan to meet with the mayor and the city manager to kind of walk through all of these, including particularly the project management side, because we're about to launch into our first phase of our facility master plan implementation. So sooner rather than later, we'd like to, right now, we're just trying to figure out where we can fit in their calendars to have that conversation. So we'll work with you on the list of items for the high level meeting to try and make the way a little bit smoother as we're talking about other things. I did want to bring up something. It's not specific necessarily to the financial statements, but I still, after all these years, don't have the clearest picture about, on the risk management side, how our insurance coverage is managed. My understanding that it all goes through CBJ. Do we sit anywhere at the table while we're discussing coverages and our premium costs and the adequacy of our coverages? So we feel comfortable with that?
Through the chair,
Yep.
each year we get our assessments from the risk manager at CBJ, and then we actually have to do our assessments on our facilities. We have to do our facilities, our malpractice, all of them, and then we look at with Angela and Joe, looking at, are we adequate? Have we added service lines? Have we added buildings? Have we made any substantial purchases, MRIs, anything? And we fill out all of those, and then we sit and we look at our coverage levels. The big one that comes up every year is our malpractice coverages and our buckets.
So do we have the right amount of coverage? Do we put our physicians in one bucket for coverage? Do we buy individual plans? So that is the one that we are always looking at every year. But we have our automobile policies, our building policies, this year, we're probably going to see some significant increases on our facility policies because Wildflower Court, we had the floods over there, so we have had some claims come out on our facilities. So we anticipate some changes coming there. We anticipate our malpractice changes coming up because we've had some settlements over the last few years coming in there. So that has been going up substantially each year. So we sit down, they send everything over to us and we meet with our insurance agent separately. CBJ does not handle that. We handle it individually.
For the malpractice.
And all of our insurance,
Oh.
yes.
And so that's good to hear. That was really what I was
Yes.
looking for. That we weren't playing telephone
No.
with CBJ.
No,
And is malpractice the only coverage that is solely for Bartlett? Or are there other lines of coverage that?
all of them are separate for Bart. Yeah, we're not, we are, they go out, our underwriters go out and they try to buy them as bulk. So they have, when they try to purchase, they try to lump all of CBJ in to get the best rates. But some of ours are very specific, based on what we have, but we meet with the underwriters individually, looking at all of our different service lines for our insurance.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear, that we had to see at the table directly with the.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we do.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Clarification of the
And
concept.
this is the time of year that I'm getting everything, and Mark is involved in it, and yes.
Thank you for that. Sorry for this.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, let's move on. The rolling budget is the next item on page 77. Angela?
Yes, so for the budget, the way it was constructed, just to refresh everybody, was to take the historical 12 months and then align those month to month. So July is a July and January is a January. And then layer in the known changes. So 4% increase on commercial insurance, which equates out to 1.4% over blended over all our charges. 5.5% increase for salaries, wages, and benefits. It's pre-negotiated and required. And then 3% on all other expenses. And then that was based on where the historical numbers fell, layered into this budget. The change there was to flatten out the contractual allowance rate down to 45.2%. Part of that is for anticipated improvements in revenue cycle management. So that's our 45.6 with mild improvement. And then the other notable item here is June looks particularly bad because that is when we pour physical inventory. I am going to go ahead and update that and spread it across the year. So materials and supplies shows an uptick from 1.3 to 4.3. It was because of the physical inventory and then pushing all that inventory into expense. We're now doing that every month and keeping the inventory pretty much flat. So we shouldn't have that big change. So I'll go ahead and fix it in the budget and then publish this again in the next finance committee. But
Yeah, that's great. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the baseline amount of 5 million or % of net revenue will not change.
Yeah, and here I'm bringing up a couple more lines on you too. If you just, we don't need to talk to them right now, but if you just take another look at those, it's the rental leases line 30, and then also depreciation amortization line 32, also the June adjustments there. If you could, when you're doing the materials and supplies for inventory, if you could just take another look at those too, I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Great. Okay, FTE count, anything exciting there, Angela?
To the chair, I will have Andrew speak to that one because he constructed it and has all the nitty
Okay.
gritty.
Oh, thank you. Andrew?
Thank you, through the chair. The purpose of this analysis, wait a second.
So it's the FTE graph.
78. Page,
There you go. Thank you. Mike.
there we go.
So the purpose of this analysis is to determine whether FTE increases are coming from service line expansion or from legacy departments growing their staffing levels. The goal is to understand what's driving wage cost increases and whether they reflect strategic growth or operational inflation. So with this data, we reviewed monthly FTE counts for calendar year 2025, including travelers. The FTEs on this graph are broken into baseline, growth, and legacy. Baseline are the existing positions at the starting of the year that remains constant at 619 throughout the year. And growth is, that category is attributable to new service lines or program expansion. And legacy, those are changes in longstanding departments, mostly addressing staffing shortages. The key finding is that roughly 75% of the FTE growth in 2025 comes from service line expansion, not legacy departments. This means that the majority of our staffing levels or our staffing increase is tied to new or expanding services. This is intentional additions rather than cost or cost drift. So quick breakdown, we started with 619 FTEs at the beginning of the year and ended with 682. This is a net growth of 63 FTEs. And of course, within there, you have some departments going up a little and down a little. With the growth FTEs, seeing most of that change with a net increase of 47 FTEs. Most of the increase in this category of growth FTEs is attributable to Bartlett Family Medicine, Bartlett Glacier Pediatrics, the operating room, and orthopedics. On the legacy FTE growth side of things, they saw a 16 FTE net increase. Most of this is attributable to Wildflower Court with 14 FTEs there, and that addressing historical staffing shortages. So summarize that service line growth accounted for 75% of total FTE increases. Legacy department growth accounted for 25% of it. So this implies that the increase in FTEs is largely attributable to strategic revenue generating and capacity expanding reasons, not due to inefficiency in core departments. Legacy departments only showed modest increases, suggesting staffing controls established in these established areas remain stable. This implies that the governance of the FTE committee is effective. Any questions on that analysis?
Well, I'll tell you, I think this is excellent, Andrew. And I really appreciate y'all putting in the time to do this. Well, let me start with Jeannie or Deb. Do you guys have any questions on this?
Just one question, Chair. Have you done this type of analysis in previous years? And if so, how do the numbers compare, the percentages?
We have not.
You've never done it.
So just for calendar year 25, the data should be there for most of those years. And for 2026, we're still working on getting a comparable report out of our new HR system, UKG. So that's why this is named to calendar year 25.
Jeannie, this is if I could just add an outgrowth of the post-COVID, there had been quite a bit of growth in staffing through COVID that was being funded by the CARES funding. And then post-COVID, those staff that had been added were reduced again. And so that was a big part of the, it was difficult, but a lot of work went into right sizing the staffing levels. And we were kind of monitoring a little bit differently, which was here's our total FTE. Here's how many of these are non-employee FTEs, and here's how many are employee FTEs, and we're kind of walking that as a total chart. And Angela and Joe felt like an analysis like this would be more effective to show the fact that, okay, we kind of brought back down to this baseline. Now we're growing again because of these other reasons, not because of the inefficiency, as Andrew spoke to very well. So there's kind of a longer conversation involved in this. Andrew, on the legacy line, how much of that's Wildflower Court? How much of that is MHU? Do you happen to know that?
Yeah, so as I said, there were, some departments had decreases and some had small increases. So Wildfire Court, by the end of the year, had a 14 FTE increase from their baseline. So they account for the vast majority of that. And MHU had 3 FTE increase, which, puts us over that 16 total increase. And that just implies that there are some departments that had staffing reductions throughout the calendar year.
In the Wildflower Court, that's mostly the CNA level, right? That we've been working so hard on.
It should be. I didn't dive into the detail.
Yeah,
for those.
that's fine.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anything more on this, Andrew or Angela? Thank you very much. I think there's probably only one person that maybe a couple. Andrew might like this the P&L walk from pre to post audit. I really appreciate this, and it's good information. Angela, do you have anything you want to share with us specifically on this?
Just a quick summary. This is for transparency, just to show what we previously published, what changes were made, why those were made, and then where we ended up post audit. So there's complete clarity and transparency as we move forward, since we had already published these statements.
Okay, that's great. So for the ones, July, August, September, October, those pages, and the depreciation especially, that's interesting. That's one of and those are, getting those things into service. We're not going to continue to have that impact going forward, though. Is that correct?
That is correct. That was due to the 3 years and $12 million of assets that were in progress that had not been capitalized, but we had placed in service. So that was catch up and cleanup. Now we are capitalizing those monthly, so that is not going to recur.
Fabulous. Okay. Jeannie, any questions on that? All right. OR lights.
Thank you, through the chair. So in October 2025, it was found that the overhead lights in the OR end of life and in disrepair. So this quote has come to you out of planning committee, was presented to them on March 6th. And now, of course, it's in front of the finance committee for approval, for hopefully movement to the full board. So you have quotes there for medical. The quote is for $136, $136,408, which includes preventative maintenance for the similar lights or the exact lights we have in our emergency department. It adds that service contract to this. So the request is for the $136,000, 408, not to an additional amount as well as 50,000, which is the Kitty Solomon clause, for a total amount of the 186,408 for electrical installation and any incidentals while we're replacing the lights. So the request is to approve the 186,408 and move this to the full board for final approval.
Suzette, can you make sure that you get the Kenny Solomon clause comment included in the minutes?
What is the Kenny Solomon?
For every project that we have approved since Kenny and I started serving, it was pre-max, but every single one is it enough should we make should we bump it up for contingencies, every single one? So yes, that's, will
So the
probably.
contract amount is 136.
Correct.
And the 50 is a contingency fund if needed, but
The buffer.
the contractor isn't told, we've got an extra 50,000. Because if you tell them we have an extra 50,000, they will spend it just for.
Plug it in
Okay.
just for, to come back to the
Right,
board.
okay.
Yeah, it's mostly, yeah, exactly. So that they don't have to come back to us and because it can create it, there can be a life of its own when it does that. But Suzette, if you'd make sure we get the Kenny Solomon quote in there, because I want to send those minutes to Kenny to let him know that we're thinking about him. And if there's not any questions, Jeannie, could you make a motion on this, please?
I move the finance committee approve the co-medical quote in the amount of 136,408, as well as an additional amount not to exceed 50 for a total of 186,408 for electrical installation incidentals for replacement of the OR lights, and move it to the full board for approval. Is there a
Okay,
second?
there doesn't need to be a second
Doesn't
since
need to be
we're a
a second.
committee of two. Yeah, but we'll consider that action taken and it'll be referred to the board at our next meeting next week.
Thank you.
And let's see, housing update.
I do not have a housing update at this time.
Okay, that's fine. I do want to make sure we get one. I know that there's some balls in the air on that. We can pick that up again next month. Okay, this brings us to our executive session. The motion is on page 108. Jeannie?
Yeah, I move the Finance and Audit Committee of Bartlett Regional Hospital to recess into executive commit session to discuss matters immediate knowledge of which truly may have an adverse effect on the finance of Bartlett Regional Hospital, specifically compensation.
Thank you.
Jeannie, do you want to take us back out of executive session?
Yeah, do I need to make a motion or so I move we end the executive session and go back to our regular meeting.
Okay. Regular session?
Any other?
If there's any, oh, there is. I almost forgot. You almost let me forget, Angela. We need to set our meeting date for next time at Anita's request. And she suggested, and let me pull up my calendar here real quick. So she suggested it probably would be best April 17th at noon. Does April 17th work for you, Jeannie?
That does, yep.
Okay, great. Works for me too, and hopefully that'll work for Brent. And okay, so our next meeting will be April 17th, and
Thank you, Matt.
so if there's, yeah, you bet. Yeah. So are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, we are adjourned. 11:40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.